Stay in your lane.
Welcome to the Mind Your Own podcast with Aaron Sorensen and Sasha Durkin, where we stick to sports, except when we're not.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mind Your Own podcast. I'm Aaron.
I'm Sasha.
And we are back for another episode. Both of us, I say that like we weren't going to be back, but both of us are just like currently in the thick of very busy seasons of life. I feel like it's always very busy, but
yes,
there's just a lot going on. I know I was just talking with Sasha before we started recording, and life is very busy for her. And you're still trying to have things that you do for yourself. It's just, it is hard to kind of balance it all. That's funny. It's been a recurring theme over a couple different recordings, but I brought up last week with my therapist, I feel off balance because there are so many things moving and I'm trying to do things here and I need to get work done. And she's like, I would suggest taking a few days off when things settle down because you can. And I was like, that's really hard for me to do, but I know I need to, because when I don't do that and I don't take the time to take a step back is when I make tiny little mistakes that don't need to be made, just because my brain reaches capacity and it's like, dude, slow down. So I am forcing myself to slow down next week. Yeah, I have found for myself kind of in a similar way that I'm not doing things for myself. And I've talked a little bit about this on my personal social medias recently, but I think I've kind of hit a point in my life where I'm like, I have spent, over a decade of my career focused on others. And that's not to say I haven't focused on myself at any point in there, but I often guilt trip myself for doing things for me, because if I'm doing something for me, that's time I could be spending dedicated to my job or dedicated to something else. And I have kind of put a kibosh on that as much as possible, where I'm trying to create TikToks for myself or blog more or just do things that I enjoy for me, where even if other people are cringing because they're like, oh, what is she doing? Why is she acting this way? I don't care, because this is stuff that it's fun for me. It's enjoyable.
Yep.
But I hit a wall yesterday where I wanted to have a blog written, and I had 5 different drafts of different things on my mind and never completed one of them because I was just so overwhelmed by literally everything. And I haven't been consistently working out in almost 2 months. And so yesterday I kicked that off, and it's been a good 2 days so far, but it's just really hard where you feel like you've lost pieces of yourself, either in a short period of time or over a long period of time. And when you're starting to kind of try to build those things back up, it can be really daunting, because it's hard to then want to take the time for yourself, because you're so used to what makes you feel accomplished is your work, is this tangible thing you can point to where you're like, well, this is the thing that pays my bills. But it's but sometimes the thing that pays your bills doesn't always fulfill every ounce of your being.
Yep.
Sometimes it doesn't fulfill any ounce of your being.
Yep.
And so you have to be able to take a break. You have to be able to take a step back. And I am very guilty of not being good at that. Very guilty of it.
Well, and one other thing before we dive into our really important topic that we're going to talk about today, I was kind of in the same boat, working out. I injured myself on Christmas Day. I separated a rib because I tripped over a dog toy in the dark and landed really hard on my side. And so then, that was an extra layer of complication when it comes to working out. I couldn't do, well, no one likes burpees, but I couldn't do those. I couldn't do a push-up. I couldn't, deadlifting was questionable type of stuff. And so I really dialed it back. And then it's really easy to fall back into bad habits and inconsistency.
Yes.
And so I've just been, I'm not trying to be too hard on myself, realizing take it slow. It's an injury. You don't want to re-aggravate it. But then also I get frustrated with myself because of the work. I want to do well at work. My job is a source of pride for me, but when it takes away sometimes from, and I mentioned this just before we started recording, sometimes you immerse yourself so much in that work that it takes away little by little from the other things in your life or other projects that you're working on. And so I think that's why partially too, why I felt off balance, because you gotta have a little bit of both that fills your cup, because if you run yourself down to empty and you have no more water in your pitcher, that doesn't do anybody any good, especially yourself. So that's my TED Talk for this episode of Mind Your Own.
Well, it's kind of fitting because we were talking about just working out or the things. And actually what prompted a little bit of my thought for today's episode is, and I'm really grateful for this because there's been a lot of things kind of like just mulling around in my head. I know the last couple of weeks we focused really heavily on the cheer and dance worlds. And I will be honest with you, I am still really fired up after everything with the LSU Tiger Girls. And I just want to throw one little caveat onto this. When we were talking about that last week, and I said that I didn't feel like a lot of national news media had picked it up, I still feel that way. So we're 1 week removed from that. And I have seen more pick it up, but it's really been more of a watch this amazing routine and less of please understand what this routine meant and why they did it and why it's going viral. The reason that this is so important is the LSU Tiger Girls competed. They performed that competition routine at a recent basketball game. And I'm telling you, the crowd was like excited, but like not to the level that they should have been if I feel like that crowd fully understood what they were watching. And that is why we have to keep having these conversations, because it's like that crowd should have been absolutely like lit
losing
up.
Their mind.
Yeah, but they just weren't in that place. And it's like, okay, well, we're not there yet because we're people, I guarantee you, in that arena did not understand what they were watching.
Yep.
So this has all been mulling in my head. So I've been sitting here thinking like, what should we talk about this week? And I got on my Peloton treadmill this morning and I had been debating because today, the day we are recording, is Lunar New Year. And in 2021, I took this 30-minute Lunar New Year ride with an instructor named Emma Lovewell. Absolutely loved this ride. And I do have a Peloton bike as well. So I was debating, do I just get on the bike and retake that class today because I'd really like to, or is there a new class? I just happened to see that one of the newer instructors at Peloton, her name is Susie Chan. She's based out of their London office. She was hosting a 20-minute Lunar New Year run. I was like, I am not in shape at all to run, but you know what? We are going to hop on this and we're just going to see where it goes. And I'm going to tell you, I'm so glad I did it. I so enjoyed that run. It was similar to the ride that I took last year with Emma Lovewell. It was so fun and it filled me to listen to Susie talk about her family, talk about her family's traditions, to hear her talk about her plan for today. And it inspired me where I messaged Sasha and I was like, we should talk about Lunar New Year, but also in the context of the fact that the Olympics are about to start in just a few days and they are being hosted in China. So let's just kind of dive into this and see where it goes. But I think when we start to get excited about the Olympics, just like I know it feels strange because we just had the Summer Olympics. Typically there's 2 years, but COVID has thrown a wrench into everything. And I think oftentimes people, and I am guilty of this as well, we just get excited about the athletes, the sports and everything that goes into it. But sometimes we fail to get excited about the host countries as well and to really dive into what we're experiencing. I know oftentimes these host countries, not oftentimes, it is what they do, through the opening and closing ceremonies, they want to show you what you need to know about their country. I mean, they highlight artists that are big in their country. They show, I know like this past summer, you're seeing the agricultural side of Tokyo and Japan. That was this last summer with, again, my brain with like COVID, because it should be like 2 years. But so the 2020 summer games that took place in late July to August 2021 were held in Tokyo. And again, like through their opening ceremony, they were able to highlight all of these pieces about Japan and about just their culture. But I think, if we only reserve it to that little piece, that's all you're seeing, that's all you're understanding, you're really not walking away with probably a real true understanding. There's no way you're gathering everything from just that.
Right.
So let's begin with the fact that when we are recording this, it is Lunar New Year. When you are listening to this, it is probably the New Year's celebration is still ongoing. It's in fact ongoing for nearly 2 weeks. So we will link all of this in the show notes at hailvarsity.com if you want to go and read for yourself. But we're going to just dive into Lunar New Year first and foremost. This is coming from history.com. Lunar New Year is one of the most important celebrations of the year. I'm reading directly from history.com because I think it's important not to contextualize exactly what I'm reading. It's an important celebration. It's the most important celebration of the year among East and Southeast Asian cultures, which includes Chinese, Vietnamese, and Korean communities, among others. The New Year celebration is usually celebrated for multiple days, not just one day. And so in 2022, it just so happens to fall on February 1st. It is also known, so you may have heard it as the Chinese New Year. You may have even heard it be called the Spring Festival. There's a number of names for it. It is all tied. It's the Lunar New Year. It's tied to the lunar calendar. Mm-hmm. So that means each year there is a new animal, and not new in the sense of like, it's not a different one every single year. It's one of 12 that rotate every 12 years. So we are in the year of the tiger. We just left the year of the ox. If you have never gone and looked up the year you were born and what your animal was, I was born in the year of the rabbit. It's very interesting because when I look up what rabbits symbolize, a lot of it feels I'm like, yes, that does sound like me. So it's fun to see what another culture says about potentially your personality and who you are. And it's just, I've always enjoyed looking into the different animals. Now, here's the other part is 2022 is just not the year of the tiger. It is specifically the year of the water tiger. This comes every 60 years. There's different elements that are associated with them. The water tiger, again, I'm reading from history.com, is action-oriented and represents strength, clearing away evil, and bravery. So we'll dive into more about the animal in just a minute. Mm-hmm. But Lunar New Year has a lot of food and traditions. So every culture celebrates just a little bit differently, but there's always various foods and traditions that symbolize prosperity, abundance, togetherness with your family. There's preparation for the Lunar New Year. Homes are thoroughly cleaned as they want to start anew for a new year. There are rituals that homes may hold to offer food, different items, gifts for ancestors, which reminds me a lot of the Day of the Dead, which is kind of neat when you start to think of like similarities between cultures. When you think of the Day of the Dead as not when you think of it, that is, I have loved to learn about the Day of the Dead and the culture for Mexican people because it is a celebration of their loved ones. They are, right. It's just such the fact that they hold these big feasts and they make their deceased loved ones favorite foods and meals and bring them the things that they love. I don't know. It just kind of gives me chills. I love it. In Chinese culture, they offer red envelopes that have money in them, typically to children. They hang red lanterns in their homes. You'll see a lot of red and gold. Those are the two colors that really symbolize prosperity, again, abundance. They make a lot of food, and those foods have symbols for them. So if you want to look them up, things like dumplings means prosperity, I believe. I was just looking them up earlier again. Noodles, I know, mean like longevity because of the length, which is super fun. Cool. I know fish is wealth. It's supposed to mean it's supposed to be a sign of wealth, and there's also very specific ways that the fish are supposed to be eaten for luck. Excuse me. So yes, dumplings are prosperity, wealth as well. So a lot of them, as you see, there's a theme of prosperity, wealth, abundance heading into a new year. So here's what I don't want to spend a lot of time just reading everything to you, but while it's, you may know it as the Chinese New Year, it is not just something celebrated in China. And when we link this history.com article, I really recommend going and spending some time reading it, because you can read about how Vietnam celebrates, how Korea celebrates, how other Asian cultures celebrate. And it's really neat. You'll be able to read about the greetings, like in Mandarin and in other languages, of how to say Happy New Year, Vietnamese. It's really neat. And I will say history.com, the reason I picked this particular source is you'll see their sources at the bottom of this article. And they went and cited and found a lot of their sources are really, really strong. So that's why I picked that. But I also want to point out from a website called ChinaHighlights.com, they specifically talked about the Year of the Tiger, which runs from February 1st, 2022 to January 31st, 2023. It is the water tiger. And so let me just give you a little bit about that. I had it. Okay. Water tiger comes from the tiger's 5 elements. There's gold, wood, water, fire, and earth. So we were talking about those elements. Water tiger indicates a prosperous year due to the tiger's auspicious strengths or signs of strength, exorcising evils and braveness. Get not like exercising them, actually like ridding yourself of them. It'd be helpful if I could read. And the thing that is like really important when you look at what Lunar New Year means is it's really this similarly, like think of how you celebrate New Year's December 31st into January 1st. There's a lot of belief of like what you do to start a new year, lead you through a whole new year. You hear a lot about a lot of traditions, people who eat black-eyed peas in the new year because there's a belief of what that means. It's the same thing. People in Chinese cultures, but Asian cultures, not just China, what you do in the new year affects your luck for the full year. So there's some pieces of this culture that believe if you stay up on New Year's Eve and say good words to your friends and family, that will bring you good luck with each of them going forward. Again, the red letters, decorating your homes, wearing a very lucky color, eating specifically lucky food, which we went over a couple of them, but like there's so many different ones. If you're wondering what the colors are for this year, tiger is orange, black, and blue. So those are your specific colors. I'm just seeing if there's anything else. We're going to link all of this because you should go read all of it. It's so fascinating.
It really is. I like the decorating your house with kumquat trees, symbolizing wealth and good luck. Like this is very fascinating.
And see, cool. It's really cool. And I was telling Sasha this before we started when I was sending, and I'm just going to say it like I did. We are 2 white women. Let us not pull any wool over anyone's eyes. We are 2 white women. And so we can only offer perspective from what we are able to learn by our own willingness to learn and research and spend time with. But it is important not to culturally appropriate something. So we are going to tie this to the Olympics in just a moment, but I think it's important when we've had a lot of conversations, especially over the last 2 years, like when in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd, and how many times did we hear a Black person say, to be an ally, I need you to go do the research. I need you to stop asking me to do all of the heavy lifting. I need you to do some of it. This is part of it, is spending time actually researching and learning and absorbing other cultures and being willing to open your eyes and your heart and your mind to how other people live and experience the world around them. Now, it is always a good idea to step outside of this and don't just spend time here, but actually go speak to other people. So like for me, I know it wasn't a direct conversation, but taking that class with Susie Chan this morning was really great because I got to hear directly from her what this holiday means. And I got to hear directly from her what, her family's traditions were, how she spends a holiday like this. And she talked a lot about how like in her family, it is all about the food. So when her husband came to a Chan family Lunar New Year for the first time, he was like, what is happening? Because there was so much food. And she was like, that's just how we do it. It is all the food you can imagine. And that is what I'm saying, is listening to people and also allowing yourself to be open to hearing people talk about those experiences in their lives. So I don't want to sit here and say I'm an expert in any way, because I'm absolutely not. I really highly recommend spending time listening to people, going and speaking with people, or going and, spending time reading some of these things, because it is so cool to hear how other cultures, how they view the world.
Yeah.
So with all of that said, again, culturally appropriating, you have to be careful here, because you can appreciate and even help celebrate something like the Lunar New Year, but you need to be mindful of what you're doing. I did see an article of somebody who offered perspective as, so I was just grabbing this. So as an Asian woman, as an Asian American, she shared her perspective on a holiday like Lunar New Year, and for her white friends, and why she, like, growing up was like, I don't want you celebrating these things. But she talked about, there are things that you can do, like learning and appreciating, that are a positive.
Mm-hmm.
But where she says you have to be mindful is there's traditional activities that mean great deals to families of Asian cultures, like the hanging of the red lanterns, or handing out the red letters, or wearing wearing culturally specific clothing, where it might feel like harmless fun, but it's actually, there's so much more to it, that if you are not aware of the reasoning for things, or why something is done,
Mm-hmm.
or the true meaning and the ancestry that's all wrapped into this, that becomes now cultural appropriation, where you're no longer appreciating it. You're just participating for the sake of participating.
Right.
So she did offer up some things, like remembering that this is a holiday about love and togetherness, and that is something that everyone can celebrate. And of course, cleaning your home, that is a big piece of the Lunar New Year, is getting your homes ready for the new year, if that's something. Obviously, eating good food, because there's so much that is tied to the food piece of it. There's also, like, just celebrating your own heritage. I really appreciated her adding this one too. So I'm going to read this and we'll link this, but this is coming from the woman who wrote this article. It was in Bustle about celebrating Lunar New Year. She said, if anything, Lunar New Year can teach us to be proud of our own personal backgrounds. Growing up, I barely learned about my mother country in school, and seeing my family celebrating this holiday has inspired me to learn more about where I come from. Each country has its own unique history and cultural identity, and I hope that learning more about this ancient holiday and its meaning can make you proud of who you are today. And so I love that, where even as you're kind of celebrating your own New Year's, and as you're stepping forward, learning about your own history, your own
Mm-hmm.
culture, the things that make you, the things that tie you to your past. Like, I really liked that one, because I think sometimes it's easy to look at others without looking at yourself. And so
Yes.
just a little reminder as we go through this, that, like, you can absolutely appreciate and celebrate other cultures, but be careful not to appropriate. And appropriation is not often intentional, but intent
Right.
and impact are different. And so
Yes.
just check yourself when you're.
I think understand, and I said this before we started recording too, like, understanding another culture and co-opting are not the same.
Mhm.
I think that it's another one of those fine line things where you can have, like you said, appreciation for other cultures, but outright taking the things that you like from those cultures and celebrating them as your own just because you like them, that's when it's appropriation.
Yes.
And it's a fine line. But I think that knowledge ultimately is power, and just understanding, I think that was really great. Like what you said about understanding your own culture. I mean, really looking into my background, I still haven't done it like in the 23andMe thing. I need to, because my mom was adopted and I want to understand the rest of the parts that make me.
Yeah.
But, even just looking at my dad's side of the family, and, my grandmother is Native American, but looking into the history of of, you know, that has been really, really interesting to me, and understanding, you know, any sacrifices or struggles or traditions that they have. It has been really eye-opening for me, and like has just broadened my understanding. I think that the point I'm trying to make here is that when you understand other cultures and take the time to have that knowledge base, it's a lot easier to understand when someone's telling you that they have been wronged and why they feel that they have been. Um, I think that that's important to point out too.
So I wasn't planning on bringing this up, but you made me think of this, and just how you were speaking to this, that I just happened to stumble upon this. I just happened to stumble upon this TikTok account recently, and it works really well with this. So I went and was searching and I found it. So I am going to I just want to be clear. I never took Spanish. I took German. I cannot roll my tongue. I have no, so anything I say in Spanish sounds awful. I just want to be very straightforward with that. But this is a business based out of Mexico, a small family business. They make huaraches, which is a Mexican sandal. If I said that wrong, I'm so sorry. Like I said, nothing I say in Spanish sounds good. So anyway, they have been sharing their shoes and the shoemaking process, and they're beautiful. I just want to say they're beautiful. I really want a pair. I followed them. I saved the video because at some point I'd really like a pair of these sandals. And somebody said, is it okay for white people to buy these? I'm genuinely asking because I don't know if it's a cultural thing, but these are beautiful shoes. And so here's what they said. And I loved it. This was such a great response. So they show more of them making their shoes. And they said, yes, we appreciate your question. And we actually get asked this quite a bit. Yes, it is okay for white people to wear huaraches, especially if you are buying from a small Mexican-owned business like ours. They go on to, and I love they're showing the whole video. I can even share this link, so if you want to go follow them, you can. All they said is, we only ask that you do your research and give credit where it's due. Our artisans put in a lot of work into making our huaraches and deserve to be recognized for it. So and they went on finalized. We want everyone to get to enjoy wearing our lovely huaraches. So we are grateful for the support, no matter where it comes from. So they're beautiful. They're stunning shoes. Like, just absolutely beautiful. But it reminded me of this, where let's say you thought, I'd like to celebrate Lunar New Year. I like dumplings. I'd love to get some dumplings. So I love Trader Joe's as much as the next person, and Trader Joe's has some great dumplings. But on a day like today, if you are truly wanting to celebrate, I would recommend finding somebody local within your city who makes authentic dumplings, and supporting them. Not because Trader Joe's dumplings aren't great, but because on a day like today, or a day like always, supporting small businesses that are founded and run by people who this is their culture. Support them because they are not only going to be able. So I remember last year on Lunar New Year's, I had placed an order for some frozen momos. It's a type of dumpling from Kathmandu Momo Station.
That's who I was thinking of, to be honest.
I love them. So when I went to go pick up the order, and this was still in the height of like, no, you don't go in anywhere. You're still getting things coming out. The woman who brought me my order, I just said to her, I basically said, I want to wish you a happy new year. And she looked at me and she was like, well, thank you. And the greatest thing about that was, in that moment, is she started sharing with me how she was planning to celebrate Lunar New Year that day.
That's like making me teary, because like those are the authentic conversations and like moments that we're talking about. You know, I'm sure that meant the world to you.
it meant so much because I got to hear from somebody who had just spent this time making the item that I was going to take home to enjoy. But I got to hear from her firsthand how she planned on celebrating the day. And that was so much more special than anything else I could have done. So when we talk about spending time and listening to people and allowing your mind to be opened in a moment, or in your heart to be opened, like, this is why. And so like that, you just reminded me of that TikTok of support. So, it's kind of, I'm in so many tangents right now, but I know like when Kendall Jenner started her tequila company, there were a lot of small Mexican tequila distilleries that were like, hold up a second.
Yeah.
Support us. We have been doing this forever. Yeah. Support us. And so it's not that Kendall Jenner can't like tequila and can't do whatever, but like when you think about like, who can I authentically support, going and doing your research and finding people, whether it's local or if you can order and have it shipped to you, supporting artisans and supporting makers and business owners who are that this is their culture, their tradition. This is authentic to them. It, again, Trader Joe's dumplings are great, but on a day like today, spend the time finding the person in your town who makes traditional dumplings, noodles, you name it, because which this fits really well to tie it to the Olympics. So the Olympics, it's so amazing that like the Summer Games, which only happened about 6 months ago, it feels like we're in a very different state once again when it comes to COVID-19 and just what we're facing with the Omicron variant and everything else. So because of that, the Olympic organizers in Beijing are having to be very, very careful. This is basically a bubble. When you go into it, you are not leaving. So if you are working or volunteering, you are there. You're not like here and there. You're not going home and coming back. Yeah. To make this Olympics happen, people are basically there for 2.5 weeks. So because of this, that means a number of people are spending time without their families through the New Year celebrations, which means these individuals, whether they're working or volunteering, are spending their Lunar New Year celebrations with foreign athletes, media, and other Olympic personnel. So I'm reading from NPR right now. We will also link this NPR. In the system that the Olympics have set up, people at the games are completely restricted from stepping foot outside of the designated Olympic spaces. The streets of Beijing, which is out of reach for athletes and other games personnel, were decorated and everything traditionally, but they cannot go. They cannot leave. Like they're there. So what has happened is you're starting to see the people that are working and volunteering who cannot be with their families, spending time in teaching their traditions to the athletes in the Olympic Village. And Yang Ying, the chairwoman of the Athletes Commission of the Beijing 2022 Organizing Committee, said this about it. It's the only time in history where the Chinese New Year and the Olympics are happening at the same time. So because of that, they have obviously decorated the Olympic Village with symbols of the holiday, the bright red lanterns. They're trying to kind of bring the Lunar New Year to the Olympic Village as much as they can. Yeah. But you are seeing them sharing their culture with people from all over the world, which means meals are being offered to the athletes that include dumplings, a traditional meal for the New Year's. Yang Ying was the one who said food is the most important thing. This Lunar New Year lasts until February 15th, and they will also be serving sweet rice dumplings, and they will be sharing as much as they can with them so that the athletes and people who have traveled from all over the world get to celebrate this. But the fact that the Chinese hosts are celebrating and ringing the New Year in with people from all over the world and sharing their traditions, they're sharing the things that make this holiday so special with people from everywhere. It's really, really cool. Like this is, I saw this story on NPR and like my heart swelled.
Yeah. it's super cool. Like reading through that article was like, that's like perfect. I mean, especially when they like the athletes and anybody associated really with the Olympics, whether it be volunteering or you know, facilitating in any way when they are in this bubble, like having something, one, it's kind of a learning experience because I'm sure that opens up conversations like to, you know, maybe even just, could you tell me like how, let's say dumplings again, are important to the holiday, like things like that. I just think it like, it doesn't force a conversation, but it opens itself up to it. And then you get, honestly, it's a one of a kind experience. Like you're one, you're at the Olympics. So holy crap. But two, you know, just the learning opportunity and like actually being able to experience it firsthand from the folks that are, you know, in the culture and can, you know, further explain kind of, you know, the history of everything is super cool.
Mm-hmm. It's like, I just think how fortunate you have to feel in that moment where you're like, I get to be here.
Yeah.
And I get to, yes, like for the people who are working and volunteering, is this how they maybe planned on spending their new year? No, they'd probably much prefer to spend it with their families. But I hope the people that are getting this opportunity to learn from them and spend this time are truly appreciative, because this is in my opinion, a once in a lifetime opportunity to learn directly from people what something means. And like, I mean, the NPR article, you can see a photo of the tiger figures. They're these little like boxed figures that they were handing out to guests. And I just like, these are things that I would never want to give away. Cause like you're seeing, and there's another photo in here where you're seeing volunteers offering passerbys in the Olympic Village the opportunity to paint calligraphy onto traditional New Year couplets. They're the flags. And when you're talking about them hanging the bright red lanterns and the couplets, that they're showing them how to paint the calligraphy on these things. Like, I mean, this is something where I imagine 99% of everyone that is there is probably so thrilled for the opportunity to learn and grow from people. But I really, truly hope, it's one of those things where it's like, I hope they're recognizing in the moment how significant this is. And it, like Yang Yang said, this is the first time in history that these two things have coincided with one another. It may not happen ever again. Like, this may never happen in quite this way again. So just truly appreciating it for this moment is important, because here's why it's so important to step outside of what you know and to talk about these things. Because, you know, when people are watching the Olympics starting in just a few days and spend about 2.5 weeks, I mean, the Olympics are fun. Whether you're a summer or Olympic game fan, there's something that people like about everything. I love figure skating. It's probably directly tied to the fact that, like, I think if you like figure skating, you're in the Winter Olympics, you're usually a gymnastics fan in the summer.
Yeah.
So like, it makes sense that like my favorite in the winter is, but I also like snowboarding and everything. I think it can be really easy to get really caught up in just the game aspect of it and just like the excitement of it. No, this country has this many medals and this and all this. But especially right now, more than ever, when we look at the fact that the last two Olympics, both the Summer Games and now the Winter Games, have been hosted in Asian countries. This is why you need to be able to step outside of just your excitement for the games and be willing to learn about the culture and learn about the countries. Because, and I shared this with Sasha earlier, this report just was published. It was published literally 14 hours prior to recording this. Anti-Asian hate crimes increased by 339% in the United States from the year before. We know that we have seen more and more anti-Asian hate crimes as a result of COVID-19. There's a belief that people from like I just don't even know how to like just to put it, I guess, just quite point blank, is people are convinced that Asian Americans, anyone of Asian background, has somehow been responsible for COVID-19. Mm-hmm. It is absolutely bonkers, which is why I'm struggling to even like get it out of my mouth, because it's like how you can get there and think this.
It makes zero sense.
But the reality is like there are people who believe all kinds of conspiracy theories and all kinds of things. And like, unfortunately, hate fuels a lot of conspiracy, and racism is alive and well. And racism is alive and well across all facets of especially American culture. And there are people who see these numbers and they kind of scoff them off as like, oh, whatever. It's, you know, it's just whatever. And we can't do that because, I mean, this article from NBC News that reported on this study, or this report, excuse me. Here's just a little, I'm just going to read this. The compilation of hate crime data published by the Center for Study of Hate and Extremism revealed that anti-Asian hate crime has increased by 339% last year compared to the year before, with New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and other cities surpassing their record numbers in 2020. The significant surge is part of an overall 11% increase in suspected hate crimes reported to police across a dozen of America's largest cities. The report also found that Black Americans remain the most targeted group across most cities. In New York, the Jewish community reported the most hate crimes last year, with researchers in part linking increases to the 3-week Gaza war in May. In Chicago, gay men were the most targeted. In terms of location, Los Angeles recorded the most hate crimes of any United States city this century in 2020 alone, with New York coming in just behind it. So the thing that like, and since we're specifically focusing on, I don't want to get into different pieces of this, but like we can at another point. But like the thing that I'm so frustrated by this, because like I saw a TikTok of two men who worked for waste management in, I think, New Jersey. It was somewhere, New Jersey, New York, who specifically put their plow down and threw snow at two Jewish individuals that they wanted to target. And it's just like the fact that like somebody is hateful enough to do something like that and feel justified in it is mind-blowing to me. But like when you think of what is happening specifically to the Asian American community, this is something we need to seriously look at and understand what's happening, because the fact that this has increased at such a significant rate over the last 2 years is horrifying. When you think of like, you see the news stories and it's like, I'm shocked, but not surprised anymore that people are acting this way. And so I guess my point, and I'm really fumbling over this, but I think my point when I think about the fact that our country is about to spend 2.5 weeks watching Olympic Games in a country that deserves our understanding of their culture. Now, I do want to just, sorry, a lot of tangents, but I do just want to point out, yes, the Chinese government is a whole different thing, not great. We need to separate the culture and what I'm talking about, what we are talking about, from the government piece of that. That is that doesn't matter. I'm just pointing out, if somebody were to be like, but the Chinese government, which is not super related. So like, why are you asking that? But I get it.
Yeah.
It's also nuanced. And I hope that I hope that people understand through the nuance. And sometimes when we have these conversations, if you hear the kind of like fumbling, it's not because I didn't show up or Sasha didn't show up or whatever prepared. It's just because I think I'm at such a loss for like how things can be the way that they are. Yep. And here's the problem and why I stumble. That is my privilege. the fact that like I get so flabbergasted at like, how is this real? Like, how is this a thing? Like, that is my privilege talking. The fact that like I can be so floored by how things are like this. And so when I hear myself doing this, where I'm like, I think I'm sort of like trying to almost like explain things to myself. And the reality is, there's a lot of hate in this world, and racism is still a thing. And it shows up when people start to connect a virus to a person they see walking down the street that they know nothing about.
Yeah.
And I might, in my privileged brain, go like, how can people do that? But this is the reality of where we are. It just is.
I think that a lot of, the reason that the conversations that we have are important, I think, to us, but also, we hear from other folks, putting a perspective on it, or filling in informational gaps. And, taking it. So when you said that's my privilege, I got goosebumps because I was like, shit, she's right. Like, and I haven't ever been able to name what that feeling is, but that's what it is. As two white females in the Midwest, we have, sometimes I think realizing it, quite a bit of privilege, and having these conversations and pointing these things out to hopefully bring attention to other folks that have privilege, and so that it maybe opens up a conversation or makes a light bulb go off, I think is super important, because it does not, you're right, make any sense to me how you connect those dots and make that the thing that makes sense in your brain. But realizing too, the fact that there are folks out there, obviously, that are connecting those dots. So having conversations with people and, bringing to light things that maybe aren't verbally spoken out loud. Like, we can have a thought where it's like, why the hell is that happening? How the hell did you get there? But without verbalizing and having those conversations, in a way, it's being complicit to the situation. So I think, when we have these conversations, it's super important, to us that we keep having them, both for our personal growth, but hopefully maybe a light bulb goes off in someone else's head, or hopefully maybe because we're talking about it, it furthers a conversation for somebody else.
Yeah. I'm glad to have found this really quick. I'm going to share this. But there's a website called The Conversation. It's a nonprofit independent news organization. It's dedicated, this is how they say it, they're dedicated to unlocking the knowledge of experts for public good. So if you're wondering what this website is, that is what it is. But a woman named Gina Wong spoke about or wrote about the Year of the Tiger and how this is an opportunity for bold changes. Tiger is bold, and combating anti-Asian racism. And this is what she said, just in a really quick review, which we will again link. She said, as an Asian woman, I thought more about my Asian ancestry, identity, and childhood experiences of racism this past year than I ever have before. And she talked about people telling her, you're too Asian, which also made me think a little bit about, you hear that a lot when there's a lot of coded words and things that people say that, like, especially for like, say a Black person, white people will often say he or she are so well-spoken. They're so articulate, which is implying, whether you mean this to or not, but this is what I'm talking about with, like, there's just like systemic things built into how we speak. You may mean that as a compliment. Your intention may be like, you're so nice to listen to. But what you're ultimately saying is, it's surprising because other Black people are not, or I assumed Black people did not speak in the way that you do. And that's why I'm always really careful about saying somebody is well-spoken, because it's probably not what you mean. What you probably mean is you're enjoyable to listen to. Your points are really interesting. What you just said is really fascinating. I liked how you explained it. But instead, the coded words that we use, because it's systemic, is you're well-spoken. So being careful of like not saying those things of like, you're too Asian, or, oh, you don't see me. Like,
Yes.
Like the fact that that stuff comes out of people's mouths.
It really does end up, I think, sometimes not broader picture, but like on the more fine-tuned conversations, it does really come down to the little things, being more aware, even if it's just the thought in your head, or putting that process in place of like being cognizant of what certain things mean when you say them out loud. Because again, it comes down to intent and impact. So the impact of saying, for your example, you're so well spoken, the intent may not be there to say what you just said, but you did say it. And it's still heard that way, or can be received that way. So changing kind of the dialect sometimes is even just an important step forward in progress. Otherwise we stay stuck, right? Like if you don't cognizantly think about or recognize the fact that those are some systemic things that are, whether we know it or not, subconsciously or whatever, are part of the dialect and can be a part of these conversations. But even just being and recognizing something that may seem minute and small is a step forward. It is progress by being cognizant of the way that you're saying things.
Yes. And if you say something and you're either corrected or you hear yourself and you correct yourself, I think there's unfortunately some kind of like, oh, I hate how I'm about to say this, but it's the only way I can think of it. There's almost this like culture war going on right now where people feel like if I'm corrected for the way that I speak or I do this, like I'm being canceled or I'm being told. And it's like, instead of getting defensive, just take a step back. And a lot of things are not being canceled if you learn from them. We've talked about that on this podcast. I have said things that I've told Sasha to leave it in because it's a good point for me to look back on and be like, why did that come out of my mouth? I actively work on a lot of things constantly. There are many things that we all say very, very comfortably. Like I think of the fact that like, and I've brought this up in an episode before, one that is still very firmly in my vocabulary and I'm still working on it is low man on the totem pole. That has been said around me my whole life. And I have had to come to terms with that. And here's the thing. Yes, you say it and it breezes past most people and they don't think anything of it. But the reality is I've been corrected on it. And instead of being a jackass about it and being like, I absolutely won't change how I do things. Like, no, I can be better. There are other ways to say, I'm at the bottom of the organizational chart. I'm working my way up from where I'm at right now. There are so many other ways. Like I can utilize some critical thinking here to come up with other ways to say things but it's systemic because it's been built into my vocabulary. And so like, I hear myself wanting to say things sometimes. And the reality is sometimes they're going to come out, but if somebody points it out to me, instead of getting defensive and going, don't come at me, like, I didn't mean that, it's as simple as saying, I'm sorry. I hear you. I will be better. That's really it. And
it's not too, I think that it's really easy. I brought this up. The universe is talking to me, yo. I brought this up in another conversation, just because the automatic sometimes response to criticism, and it's not always criticism. Criticism can be constructive. Criticism can be negative, but it's not always a fully negative thing. So I think that sometimes the automatic response to any kind of criticism, especially if someone's pointing out, the way that you said something, or, a phrasing that you used, it's not a knock on you as the person. It's drawing attention to the fact that what you said may be incorrect or may be offensive to someone. So yes, like maybe it does feel like criticism and you get defensive because you're like, well, I didn't mean it like that. That's fine. You maybe didn't, and you maybe didn't realize that what you just said could be offensive to somebody. But if someone is pointing it out to you, they are trying to help you and benefit you.
Yes.
And further a conversation, or, like maybe down the line, you have a conversation about it. But taking that beat sometimes, I think, okay, let the defensiveness fall off. It's not a reflection of who you are as a person. It was something that you said. Those things are correctable. You can change your way of thinking. You can change the way that you say something. I think it's like human nature sometimes to automatically get defensive of any type of criticism at all, but it's not ultimately you as the whole of the person. It's a phrasing that you use that may be offensive to somebody else.
And, I think if we were to say, like, as, what we want to take, what we'd like to take from this, what we would like to recognize, at least what I would like to, is I think through the Olympics, as you are enjoying, and if you're somebody who's like, I don't like the Olympics, it doesn't matter. It's going to be on your TV, whether you want it to be for weeks. Taking a moment to, like we said, go support a local business. I can think of multiple in Omaha, some really great, like, again, yes, you might like Hy-Vee's Chinese food, but there's nothing authentic about it.
Right.
So go find an authentic Chinese restaurant near you and support them. Try something from a local business that maybe you haven't tried before. There are many, like I know here in Omaha, there's a really great Asian market that you can go and you can buy some really great authentic food if you want to go sincerely support and try something. And I think, if anything, and this isn't much a challenge for me, is spending time. If you want to sincerely honor the Lunar New Year, but also honor Chinese culture, and I should say more broadly Asian culture, knowing that it goes beyond just China. But when I was thinking of the Olympics, saying,
yes,
actually spending some time researching, maybe go find a book that is of interest to read, go listen to a podcast, read any of the links that we're going to link here. And just so you know, they go and spread more. Like, for instance, the article that I was talking about on The Conversation, again, written by a woman named Gina Wong, she gives some action items where there are some different organizations worldwide that are making a difference in Asian communities. Like in the United States, there's the Asian Mental Health Collective. You can go support, you can go become familiar with them. They have a directory. She linked a directory of Asian Canadian therapists. If you're somebody who's in Canada, she did the work. So the least we can do is read, learn, spend time with, appreciate, because we're all going to have, like I said, we're all going to have the Olympics on our TV. They're going to have they're going to put the opening ceremonies on all of our televisions and all of your streaming platforms. Take a moment to appreciate what you're going to see. I promise you're going to see a lot of tiger imagery. The Lunar New Year is going to get brought into the opening ceremonies. Go learn about it. Go learn about, like, maybe go learn what your animal was the year that you were born, and learn about what they say that brings out in your personality. Like, these are the things that if you spend time with it, it's not cultural appropriation, it's cultural appreciation at that point. And you're taking the opportunity to learn something that you maybe didn't know before.
Exactly.
So as we spend time appreciating athletes and the excitement of the Olympic Games, and you hear about Lunar New Year, like, just spend some time with it, appreciate, like, as much as you can. And like I said, I did this run this morning. I was awful. I have not run in like 2 months. So it was a terrible run for me personally, but I enjoyed it so much because I feel like I walked away having a different understanding of Susie Chan, this instructor for Peloton, because of what she was willing to share in that moment.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for that. I'm just super grateful. So, like, when we talk about these things, just go spend some time. That's really the most important thing. Now, before we wrap this up, we have received some emails from you and we really appreciate that. Keep sending them. Mind Your Own Podcast at hailvarsity.com. Sasha and I are just kind of figuring out the year ahead, especially as it comes to asking guests to be a part. We have some guest ideas and hopeful guests lined up here soon. So just go send an email to Mind Your Own Podcast at hailvarsity.com with some ideas, suggestions, whatever else. I told Sasha I've been sending emails to her as well, but I'm going to be better about responding. Working on this mental health piece, which will somehow, like, always, like, emails are a stressful thing to me, but you know what? You're also nice. So we will be responding. Don't worry, but keep sending emails. Mind your own podcast at hailvarsity.com. You can message us on Twitter at Aaron Sorensen, at Sasha72. And we will be back next week. The Olympics will be in full swing. So who knows what storylines we will have at that point. But we look forward to just continuing conversations that impact sports like this in different and unique ways. And we appreciate you listening. We hope you'll join us next week. We will talk to you then.
Bye.
A Huda Media Production.